Hey guys, so here's the final image that we're going to be creating. And here's a simple animation of the character in Maya. And the whole experiment that I'm doing is creating a quick character, all completely 100% done in zBrush. And then, for animation, instead of doing rigging, I wanted to see if I can use blend shapes and morph targets. So to start the character, I jumped into zBrush and started modeling with just a basic sphere. And as you can see, I'm just using the move tool and the standard brush, just really basic stuff. Just kind of pushing and pulling a hole for the mouth. And initially, I decided to sculpt the character with the mouth open. So then in Maya, I thought maybe I can close it. And here I'm just using the inflate brush to add the lips to the character. And again, just really basic, and I don't really have an exact idea of what I'm going for, but I just wanted to create kind of a fun cartoon fish. So here I'm using a curve alpha brush to create kind of the thing that hangs in front of his face. I'm not really sure what it's called, but I should have looked that up. But just a really simple shape, and then I kind of inflated it to make it a little thicker, put it in the center, and then instead of adding a sphere to the end, I just simply inflated a sphere right out of the shape. So I think that gave me the kind of a basic shape that I was looking for. Then I just grabbed the standard brush with the sub activated and pushed in kind of a couple holes for the eyeballs. Then appended a sphere and just kind of put the sphere in place where the eye sockets are. And I wanted the eyes kind of be, kind of large and cartoony. And now I'm just kind of creating the eyelids that go over the eyeball. And just using, again, just standard brush and inflate brush, and just literally just packing, adding more volume to the shape. Just really simple stuff. Then I took my time with the eyeballs because I was thinking I want to make sure they're nice and clean and not too messy looking. And then I also was trying to keep in mind that I'm going to be attempting to create a blink using the morph target, so I wanted to create enough volume for the bottom and top lid. And then here I'm just taking a plain sphere, turning it into Dynamesh, and you can see it has 221 points at this point. And my goal is just to simply create a pupil by simply literally just drawing it with the polypaint. And I'm just experimenting with trying to figure out what the eyeballs should look like, and I really wanted something cartoony, so then I added a couple little reflection, dots, and I thought that looked pretty cool. And then I changed my material to toy plastic to give that kind of a wet material look. And let's see, at this point I am just playing around trying to figure out what do I want my main body color to be. Then I just flipped the eyeball to the other side just using mirror and weld. Still just kind of experimenting and trying to feel what the shape should be. I decided to keep the part that's sticking out separate. I didn't merge it with the main body shape. And for the tail and the fins, I just literally just simply used masking to mask it out, and then used move tool to pull the geometry right out. So just really simple stuff. Here I'm just taking the move brush and attempting to shape the tail to something that looks a little more interesting. Then adjusting the mouth, just adding a little more volume. Alright. Next, I drew the mask for the fin, and just used the Alt key to kind of clean the mask up, and just simply using the move tool, I just pulled it out. And as you can see, I'm just literally just moving stuff around. I'm not even using anything fancy, just simply kind of treating it as a clay sculpture with fun cartoony shapes. So I was pretty happy with that mohawk fin on top. I thought that looked kind of fun. And next I pulled out the side fins. And I'm using Dynamesh at 344 resolution, so that the entire main body is almost 1,000,000 points, and it's just enough to give me enough resolution to move things around, and at the same time not, have it too low resolution. So here I was just trying to figure out some kind of a fun tail on the back. And then I was dealing with little spaces that were happening once I re-Dynameshed it. So then I just inflated the shape, and then re-Dynameshed, and then got rid of it. I'm not sure why that was doing that. Here I'm just creating the tongue shape. Just simply putting it into place and puffing it up using the inflate brush. And then bending it using the kind of a large move brush. Then I realized I have that point at the end there, and I wanted to get rid of it, so I used the Damien standard to create a line kind of down the middle. Just playing with the tongue a little more. And next I think I decided to create a couple teeth, but before I did the teeth, I did want to set the tongue to be red, to start start to feel like it's actually advancing forward. And then for the teeth, I just simply grabbed another sphere, sliced it in half, and using the move tool just kind of sculpted the teeth to be round enough where they don't look dangerous, they still look kind of cute. And just simply duplicated a bunch of them to kind of align them in a row. And I was really trying to avoid having them look too duplicated, so I tried to change the shape and the size by just scaling them and moving them around. Alright, so once I got the teeth done, I think the main body and with the teeth and the tongue really began to look kind of cool. Then I realized the hole inside the fish needed to be closed, so because it's Dynamesh, I was simply just inflated it and re-Dynameshed it and got rid of the hole inside. And here I'm just trying to jump between different parts of the fish and seeing if I can slowly begin to shape it more and more, creating something a little more fun and interesting. So a lot of times I'll just rotate the model a bunch of times, and even if I'm working on some other part, if I see something, I'll go in and adjust it, even if it's something else, because a lot of times when you rotate it, you get to an angle where something needs to be adjusted, and a lot of times you don't really see that that imperfection anymore. Here I'm just playing with the color, and I decided to go with the purple, a little better than the green, and just using kind of a lighter color for the fins for the top and the side and the tail. Really simple stuff. I just simply used the poly paint. And the experiment that I was trying to do is I wanted to see if I can create an entire character in zBrush, including all the paint. So I wanted to see if I can paint using the poly paint and not bring it into Substance Painter. Just kind of a fun experiment to see what that would look like, and maybe that would give kind of a different feel, more kind of a painty, toy-like feel. Again, just an experiment. Normally I would bring the model into Substance Painter and then use tools in Substance Painter to paint, but using poly paint was a lot of fun. The other really important thing that I should mention is I am working on the high-res model, and I'm not really worried about using or creating the low-res version yet. So what I wanted to do is see if I can create a high-res model completely without any planning for the low res, and instead of manually going in and creating quads in Maya, I wanted to see if I can just use Z-Remesher and using the projection in zBrush, if I could project the high res onto the low res, a lot like what we do in Substance Painter when we bake textures. But you can do something similar here in zBrush, where you project your high-res model with the paint over the low-res base. So you will see that coming up. But at this point, I'm just still creating more detail, kind of keeping it very whimsical and playful. And I was using the standard brush with the drag rectangular setup, and just simply dragging things in different places and giving him kind of a lighter belly. And then here I wanted to match the tongue color, so I pressed C to copy the color, and then I turned on my back face to make sure that the paint, as I'm painting it, doesn't spill over to the other side. So then I just painted the inside of the mouth, and then I thought maybe I'll also add some kind of manual shadows as well. Just kind of paint in some of the darker areas. And poly paint is great at that, because it's very easy to paint and then use smooth brush to create fun gradients. So here I kind of did the same thing. I made the tongue to be a little darker in the bottom, and then try to add a couple highlights on top, just like you would with any painting program. Alright, just having fun with the front piece here. I was trying to make it a little lighter, and again keep it fun and whimsical, but at the same time make sure that it has kind of a same theme with the colors. And it still felt like the character's a little bit too simple for me, so I added a few more things to it. Here I was just dragging on kind of almost like a scale thing, but I didn't want to overdo it, so I just put it in a few key places. I didn't want to make it look too busy. And then here I just wanted to add some normal details, so the character doesn't feel too flat. So I was just using standard brush with some alphas that are default alphas in zBrush, where you could just grab the lines and kind of just literally draw them on to create a little variation in geometry, making it look a little more maybe organic. So at this point I was pretty happy with the fish. He was coming along nicely. And here I just added a little more detail to the front piece. Again, just trying to break up anything that's boring and solid. And this seemed like a good way to add a little more detail. If any real marine biologist watches this, they'll probably have a problem with the fact that this is not a real reference of the fish, but I'm just having fun creating something that is silly and colorful and kind of loud. Here I thought maybe I'll add a little accent of the kind of a neon bluish that is in his eyes, his pupils. So I just wanted to add just a little bit, kind of tie in the mood of the character and see if it maybe felt a little better. They're very subtle, but I thought that worked. Alright, so the next step that I tackled is this is where I stopped working on the high-res version of the fish, and I started to create the low res. So here I just combined all the teeth into one subtool because I didn't need all those teeth to be on different layers. And next I went through and made sure that none of the high-res pieces or layers had any subdivisions. So I was checking to see if any of them I want to make sure before I combine them into one, I want to make sure that they didn't have any kind of different subdivision levels. Here I just thought maybe it would be a good idea to add a little color to the base of the teeth, just so they don't look too white. And I was just simply painting that in with the standard brush and using the polypaint with, you could see that my RGB intensity is very, very low. So I was trying to create some kind of a subtle effect. Once I painted the teeth, I realized that I can't really see it in the base, so I had to bring the body back and touch it up a little more once I saw how it actually looked with the body and the tongue. Alright, so then I saved the character, and I think this is where I started creating the I'm naming each layer high because I'm intending to create low right below it. So each element, each layer is going to have a low version. In the low version, there's just going to be a Z remeshed geometry of the high, right? So I didn't want to, again, bring it into something like Maya and do retopology manually. I just wanted to see if I can just generate a low poly geometry right here in zBrush. So once I created a layer for each element, I went into Z remesher and started playing around with simplifying the geometry and completely ignoring the colors and the textures, because what my intention is to create a low poly version of each one, and then after that I was going to make the UVs, and you'll see me doing that. And then once I had the low poly frame for the fish, and all the UVs generated here in Maya automatically, then I wanted to try the projection of the high-res model onto the low-res model. So that's something that I haven't done for a while, and especially in ZBrush 2022, so I wanted to see how that works. That's something that I used to do a lot before Substance Painter came along. That was one of the workflows. I don't think I would do this too much because still think it's probably best to create a low resolution base and then just subdivide it and sculpt detail on top of that while everything is UV'd, and then just add texture or polypaint if you wanted to. But in this case, I didn't do that. I wanted to see if I can just kind of do it the old way, the kind of a backwards way. All right, so you can see I did the teeth, I did the eyeballs, and then I did the tongue. So I'm doing it kind of a medium-low resolution for each piece. After the tongue, I moved on to the body, and with the body I tried a couple different things. You will see me trying the Z remesher. And once the model was automatically Z remeshed, I actually tried to reduce the topology, but you could see on the very top and the sides it began to break. So I wasn't happy with the automatic Z remesher, and luckily there's still another option next to Z remesher called Legacy 2018, which is an older way of doing retopology. And once I tried that, that gave me a much better result for some reason, at least in this situation. So you could see that I'm kind of concerned with the fact that the model did not Z remeshed well to kind of my liking. So here I am turning on Legacy 2018, and I set the target to 5K with the Adapton, and that seemed to create a much better frame, keeping the fins and the tail intact, even after I reduced the topology. So you could see that the shape held much better in the Legacy mode. Now this is that's not always the case, so you kind of do have to play around and see what works and what doesn't, but in my case, for some reason, this was a better way to go. Here I just quickly experimented to see what the unwrap would look like before I do all the pieces, just as a test. Alright, I copied the low-res eyeball to the other side, so now I have two of them, and you can see now literally every single element is low resolution. Not UV'd and not painted, but simply just the frame. So now I'm going to bring all the pieces down the list so I can combine them all or merge them into one. At this point everything is still separated, but in order for me to create the UVs I do need to combine everything into one. So I'm just simply merging it down. And I was happy that I had groups, auto groups, so I could take advantage of that when creating the UVs. You can see I selected polygroups and turned off symmetry, and this was the automatically generated UVs. They looked good enough for me to move forward. Alright, here I'm just going through each piece and turning off the Dynamesh mode. I wanted to get ready and merge the high res into one piece as well. So you can see now I'm left with one high res layer and one low res layer. And again, low res layer doesn't have the paint. It's just now it has the frame, the topology, and it has the UVs. And this is where I will move forward with projecting the high res onto the low res, kind of baking over. So both of them need to be selected, both of them need to be turned on. And then I simply went to project, and I was playing with a couple different settings. So dragging the projection about halfway on the mean and about 90% all the way to distance, 0.57, seemed to give me a decent result. And you can see how now the high res projected itself onto the low res. The only thing I had to do for the low res is I had to subdivide it a few times. So I subdivided, I believe, 5 times to give me enough geometry to hold the new projection. So once it projected, I just had one tiny little spot on top to kind of to fix. It wasn't a big deal, and I could probably I could have maybe reprojected it and seen if that fixed it, but I was okay with just touching up a couple little imperfections. So right now you're looking at the version of the low res subdivided with the paint being projected. Again, it's something that I used to do a lot before Substance Painter came along, and polypaint was really the main way of getting cool textures. So this is kind of a older way of working, but it still works. Alright, so once I finished a couple small touch-ups, I let's see, what did I do next? Then I went to the texture map, and because the low res model now has polypaint on it, I created texture from polypaint, and you could see what that looks like. So the texture looked nice, and you can project it straight from polypaint onto your UVs. Next, I dialed it down to 1 to create the normal map, but that wasn't necessary because I am going to take the high res and the low res and bring it into Substance Painter for baking, so I can get normal map from Substance Painter instead of doing it here. But I just did it anyways, just as an experiment. So you can see I have both the texture map and the normal map, which I'm going to export out for Substance Painter. So then I went to zPlugin multi-map exporter, and then in there you can turn on what you want to export, including the mesh. You can export the low res frame with the normal map and the textures. I turn off the groups under export, but I'm not sure that makes any difference because later I had to fix that in Maya anyways. But here I just created the maps. So that only took 20 seconds. Then I went to my computer and wanted to double check and see what the maps look like before I went inside Substance Painter. So this was the OBJ file that was exported out. This was the texture map. And this is the normal map, but again, I didn't end up using it. So then I jumped into Substance Painter. And one of the things that I did do is I took the high-res model from zBrush and I decimated it to create a high-res version for Substance Painter. So then I took the decimated model and brought it in into Substance Painter here to kind of create the bake for the character. So that's what this is, and here's the final result of the low resolution and the decimated model being baked into the low res, and it looks really nice. And keep in mind, all of this was automated, so I was pretty impressed with the fact that I didn't have to do much to it. Alright, so then I just imported the texture and kind of just dragged it into the color slot to see what that looks like. Now I'm just playing with the roughness, and I thought it was really neat that you can create polypaint in zBrush and just simply import it into Substance Painter, and it just works. Everything just looks really nice. If you wanted to, you can even use Substance Painter to add even more painting and detail, but I didn't do that. I just kind of left it the way I had it in zBrush. So here I just exported all the maps and jumped into Maya. Once I brought it into Maya, you can see all the pieces on the left came in for the poly group, so then I just combined the mesh into one and changed the edge flow to be soft so it looks nice and smooth. And next I went to the Substance plugin and just plugged in all the maps, and then I realized that I didn't have the ambient occlusion, so I came back to Substance Painter and exported that out by using mesh maps. So that's the ambient occlusion. Alright, so once I used the plugin, it created the shader network for me, so then I just simply took the material that Maya created and just assigned it to my fish. Of course it looked kind of dark because there was no lights, so I turned on the Arnold lights and brought in a map, HDR map. And the final result looked pretty cool. So my experiment moving forward was to take the shape editor and create a couple different animations instead of using joins. I wanted to see if I could create a few fun animations just using the morph targets, just as an experiment. So here I am just selecting the bottom part of his mouth and using vert and soft select to kind of define the area that I want to bend. So again, instead of using joints, I thought it would be fun to try to see if you could also create fun deformations or expressions using just the morph targets. And then in addition to using moving points around using the verts, you can also use the sculpting tools as well to use that for morph targets, which is really cool because you can create some really interesting, fun shapes that maybe it would be hard to achieve with joints. So again, just playing around and seeing what's possible. So as you can see, I'm using the verts to move points around and use the smooth sculpting brush to kind of smooth it out and make it somewhat appealing or soft, so the shapes don't have anything too sharp. Alright, then I created a few fun deformations for the tongue as well. Alright, next I kind of pushed the mouth a little more. I realized I thought it would be cool to see if I can actually close it all the way. And I have to tell you, I was really happy with the results and seeing that maybe it wouldn't work for a game character specifically. Maybe it would, I'm not really sure, but as far as the animations go in Maya, using morph targets is definitely something that you can get really creative and have a lot of freedom. So that was a really interesting experiment for me to see how far I can push the shapes. And there's really no limits. If the geometry is good, you can create some really crazy expressions and stretch it. Especially for cartoon kind of animation, this is a cool way to do things in addition to using joints. Alright, here I'm just creating kind of a fun blink. So I'm just taking the top and the bottom eyelids and just kind of pushing them to close them to create a blink. And then I thought maybe it would be fun to attempt to animate the hanging thing as well. So I added a really simple stretch effect to that as well. And then I used the same technique for the side fins and just simply moved them just a little bit to create kind of a fun simple animation test. And for the animation test, I just simply set all the keyframes on frame 1, and then went to frame 24 and set keys there as well. And then on frame 12, halfway, I just sort of moved all the sliders that I made the changes to see how they all look in sync together. And that was kind of the final animation experiment. So later I would definitely, if I would end up using something like this, I would add a joint to the tail and the body, but the joints and the morph targets together create an awesome effect. So I hope you had fun. This was a fun little experiment, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.